evening. This is Hannah Klein. Welcome to my podcast, Hannah Klein's Time. Today, I invited Rabbi Avi Schwartz, and we discussed anti-Semitism and Shabbat. Well, this Shabbat. And also the meaning of Shabbat for Israeli people. But I could not help talking about how alarming it sounds to listen to the news in Japanese for many reasons. It is not laughable. It is not funny. And what the politics has been going on in Japan, that is so alarming too. And I don't think I can be optimistic anymore. Really. It's very, very serious. So I hope that, you listen to this conversation, really, that I had earlier today in the afternoon, my time, early in the morning in Israel. Good morning.
Good morning.
I heard the missile alerts just a
Hmm.
few minutes ago. So
Yes.
I hope that you really feel, stay safe. I
Thank you.
mean, very,
Everybody's getting a lot of exercise, running up and down the stairs,
hmm I see.
especially the pregnant women and the elderly ladies,
Mhm.
you know, and not in best shape at all. Some of them can't make it to their bomb shelter, so they stay in the middle of the stairwell. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, stairwell is also safe. Bomb shelter, of course, is safer, but they're going up and down the stairs is difficult at a certain age sometimes. If a person, whatever his condition could be, not even the age sometimes. Some of the person not in the best physical condition. So, but we've had a lot of these things in the last few days.
oh, yes, yes, it must. And there
Amazing news.
has been a lot of attacks, really.
Hmm.
I
Yeah, yeah, sure.
like one hit like the hospital in Beersheba, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a miracle that the day before, for some reason, all of a sudden they got in their heads. What happened was, God told them a message: move, evacuate, go to another building. They did. The next day, all of a sudden was attacked. Miracle. It's a
Yeah.
miracle. Great miracle.
You know what? I think it's because really, God is watching over
Oh yes, there's so many miracles. Incredible.
you. Really, I
So many
mean,
miracles.
yes, exactly.
And something also, by the way, interesting. Even the Druze community, the non-Jewish, the Druze, Druze,
Hmm.
they believe they are descended from Jethro, the father of Moses.
Hmm.
So they're in awe because why? There's 10 million people in Israel,
Mm.
and from 80% are Jewish, about
Hmm.
20% are Muslim, maybe a little more or less. I'm not giving exactly the complete accurate numbers,
Hmm.
but within that small minority, there's Druze also and Christians. And
Mm.
the thing is this, which is amazing is, this is amazing, that with the Druze have been telling
Mm.
us, said, we're shocked and amazed and overwhelmed the fact that the people who have been basically killed by all the Iranian bombs and the
Hmm.
debris have been non-Jewish. Now,
Yeah,
that's
like in
shocking.
Haifa,
And,
mosques.
and two mosques with now, why is that amazing? Think about it. Majority of the people are
Mm.
Jewish. So that means percentage-wise, the bomb falls, it should be hitting Jewish areas. And so it is in a certain way, but the bombs are falling on non-Jewish areas. So first of all, it's amazing. So the Druze have been saying what amazing protection the Jews have by God. But on the other hand, you see also the savagery, and you see how the Iranians don't care about anyone, non-Jewish, Jewish, Muslim, not Muslim. They just want to destroy. So
Um,
that's
well, see, you are rabbi, and you're very knowledgeable about religion, of course. But I have been watching, the statements of like Khamenei
yeah,
over the years. I mean, he's crazy, but you know what? It's not just about laughing and saying crazy. He is dangerous, really.
yeah.
I mean,
But that's,
he
you see, that's
is
part of their
a
religion.
theological cult. You know
Yes.
what?
So
But the sad
they believe,
part is that the Japanese media thinks that he has the right to rule the nation in the first place. I mean, how many people did he kill, like among the
mhm,
Iranians? I mean, he
that's,
killed just 12,000. I counted this the other day.
yeah,
Innocent
yeah,
people, like, just to show, just fears, it's like ruling people with fears, really. And I really,
that's,
yeah.
wow. That really shocking me
Mm,
that the Japanese people believe that. I mean, that they that they let believe Khomeini should be in charge. That's really
right?
sad. That's
Yeah.
really sad. It has nothing to do with Jewish, non-Jewish. From perspective, if they could just see the amount of people and the Iranians themselves, how they've been persecuted, women and those who've been political opponents and so forth, those who have different ideologies, had the amount of they murdered, the amount of people they tortured, raped, and killed,
Yes.
right? And their own people, and that the Japanese population still are saying that Khomeini has a right to rule. That's very, very, very sad. I'm sorry to
Well,
say, but it's very
it
sad.
seems like, you see, the Japanese do not have any knowledge about the abuse of Khamenei, like abuse of human rights, basically. And also, I mean, the tortures and all these atrocities that he has done over the decades. I mean, the Japanese media's concerns are not that. And also, the Japanese government keeps inviting the foreign minister.
It's
Stop.
very sad.
It's very, I'm very, very,
You know,
disappointed.
from the point of view of those who understand that God runs the world, that's not a very good point. That's not a very good thing to have.
Mm,
First of all, people say, "Is there a God?" Well, let me say this way: uh, certain non-religious people, atheists, a while ago, scientists, mathematicians, computer scientists, biologists, they took computer data and they began to analyze, purely at a scientific level,
mm,
what's the chances of having one enzyme being produced, one enzyme. So they worked it out mathematically based on all the biology that we have and based on all the data that we have. And they came up with a uh, astonishing calculation. It would take about 70 million years of random evolution, so to speak, to produce
mm,
one enzyme.
mm,
Now, once they realized that, and they
mhm,
said, this is shocking.
mhm,
How is it possible that we have so many different types of creatures on our planet Earth?
mm,
Not just one enzyme, plants and amoeba and bacteria,
mm,
and then we have in terms of water life, plant
mm,
life, animal life, human life,
mm,
the amazing creations, the
mm,
amazing abilities that human beings have, and so forth.
mhm,
So they came to the conclusion. The name is Gittner and Blinsky. These are some of the scientists who were into it, who discovered this, and they who were atheists then said, there must be intelligent designer because it's just too extreme to have all these possibilities, and no matter what, even 70 million years, one enzyme cannot be produced.
mm.
How's it possible to have even so many variety, so much variety of life in the world? So they became believers in God. Now we see ourselves with our own technology that we see now, especially with AI, that anything and anyone can be recorded and seen and so forth. We see it ourselves anywhere
Instant.
around the world.
Yes.
So if human beings can have such amazing technology,
Mm.
then imagine the one who created the universe himself,
Mm.
who created the subatomic world, the quantum physics world, the RR world, the different universes and so forth. And there is, and we see from what we believe and what we see that there is morals and ethics. Now,
Mm.
people would ask the question, why is there evil in the world? Right?
Mm.
That's always a question people ask. Why is there evil? Well, so first of all, you understand this world is a world of possibilities. Meaning what? When a person is born, they're born into a world, they're given a certain type of mission. They themselves chose it before they were born, so to speak. And the heavenly court gives each one a certain type of mission in order to, for him or for her,
Mm.
to achieve in this world, their purpose. Some are born rich, some are born poor, some are born tall, some are born short, some are born, intelligent and opposite, whatever the case may be. Each one has their own particular challenge. Now, the thing is, the person is also, because they have to rectify themselves, can only be rectifying themselves in a world where there's extremes. So to speak, this is a world where everything is possible, good
Mm.
and evil. Okay? Good and evil are the same coin, each from a different side, and both are needed for a person to grow. So what happens is that when you have a situation whereby you have, so to speak, the suffering in the suffering in the world is a temporary thing because the world is very temporary. What does that mean? Every human being lives a certain amount of years. It could be basically, it could be um, 120 years, right? 10 years,
Mhm.
1 hour. It could be, let's say it's 1,000 years, right?
Mhm.
Still, it's a finite set of time, and it goes by very, very quickly. Now, give me an analogy. A person goes to an amusement park, so to speak, right?
Mhm.
In the amusement park, rides. Different rides can be for children, different rides for
Mhm.
teens, adults, and so forth. Now, at the end of the day, let's just someone just decides to stay in their place and not and go on the rides. So the end of the day comes along, and then they realize they lost all that valuable time complaining about, oh, what they could do, what they can do, and so forth.
Mhm.
That's life. Meaning what? A person has a certain amount of time to experience in this world
Mhm.
many, many things. So the person who's experienced these things has to understand from the get-go, this world is a difficult world. It's a world whereby there are challenges. And these challenges are not made to break you, just the opposite. They're made to build you up. Now, through that suffering,
Mhm.
there's also a person that's able to rectify any type of sin they could have done, or they've done, or any type of, of not just sin, but anything that they may have to change about themselves.
Mhm.
Now, that being the case, then a person has the opportunity only in the world of possibilities. So when people see the world, quote unquote, there's evil and suffering,
Mhm.
that is basically an opportunity for
Mhm.
the person to change the world,
Mhm.
to be involved in the world, to perfect the world,
Mhm.
and also the person to receive repentance and redemption in this world.
Mhm.
See? So therefore, the suffering, so to speak, is a cleansing mechanism for the soul, and the soul is eternal. When people ask a question, example, why do you have difficulty in life? It's the same way when an athlete trains, right?
Mhm.
The athlete trains every single day. For what? For that 10 seconds to run the 100 meters, or for the, right?
Yeah,
Or to do the decathlon, whatever,
exactly.
or,
Mhm.
or that 2 minute gymnastic routine. Think
Mhm.
about it. Spend 4 years, day in
Mhm.
and day out. You don't go with your friends. You don't go out and have a good time. You go to the gym, all for
Mhm.
2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And then after they achieve the bronze or the silver, or the gold, or even if they didn't achieve it, just the fact that they were involved in it, just the fact that they did it, they can say, "Wow, what an amazing accomplishment I've done. I wasn't like the rest. I had a goal. I overcame my personal weaknesses, and look who I am." That's life. And people don't understand that. They have a chance at the end of their life to basically to say, I lived a life worthwhile. I overcame this challenge. I overcame the struggle, and I produced something great, right? And that's when you really find out who are your friends and who are not your friends. That's when you find out who you can rely on, you can't rely on, and most of all, you find out who you are. So why am I saying all of this? Is because again, if the people of Japan want to know the truth, then they have to recognize their own history. And what the history is that for 2,000 years, Japan was imperial. It was a ruler, it was an emperor, and so forth. And we know very well, without talking about religion, but emperors like power and they want to keep power. And one of the ways of keeping power is to prevent population from having knowledge.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. The less knowledge the population knows, the more we can control you, right?
Yes.
Exactly it. That's one of the reasons why uh, religion is a very, very, very dangerous thing sometimes. Because religion, many times, is not in the hands of good people. It's in the hands of people who like power, who like to control, and will use religion for their own selfish means. And the same way when it comes to politics. Anybody who's read Machiavelli, and Machiavelli says very clearly, he says, in the world of power, it has nothing to do with being moral, not moral. To do if you want to win and not win. If you want to win, this is the way how you have to do it. By tricking people, by manipulating people and so forth, but not letting people have knowledge. It's in countries where people do have knowledge and they start rectifying themselves, learning about themselves and their history, they change themselves. Now, why is this so important? Because, as we mentioned before, there is God, there's a creator, and the creator is moral, and the creator wants to see human beings do good things. Each nation is tested. Each nation is tested to they rise to the occasion whereby they fulfill their moral duty. So now it has nothing again to do with Jewish, not Jewish. The Japanese people have to ask a question: why is Khomeini allowed to do what he does? And now they have to do research. The same way, if I were to simply say, well, there is someone, let's say, someone in a different foreign land attacking Japan, and I had to ask a question: is Japan innocent? Did Japan provoke it? Is there a reason why Japan is being attacked? If I ask a question, with different history of Japan, was Japan ever did it have rulers that were kind to it, not kind to it? Whether this class systems, samurai and so forth, Bushido, types of religion, what was the history? When a person is able to reflect upon themselves, then they can change. That's one of the beauties of the Torah, the Bible, the Jewish Bible. If you look very carefully, of all the nations of the histories of different nations, the Jewish people are very, very, should I say, self-aware in terms of their ups and downs, of their citizens, of what they've done over the years, and so forth. We don't sugarcoat. We don't sugarcoat our history. There are times you can read the Bible stuff and says when the Jewish people had done sins, not done sins, when they were great, not great. And this is a type of history that's different from all the nations. Now, basically, it can be summed up in a nutshell like this way. We believe that Adam and Eve are the parents of all humanity. This story in the Torah, in the Bible, is a very amazing story, which is a very telling story about how human beings should see their lives. The story goes as follows. God had given a commandment, one commandment only. Now, people understand something. Adam and Eve were really AI. What do you mean AI? They had super incredible powers, amazing powers. They're able to grasp from one end of the universe to the other end of the universe with incredible intelligence that God gave them. So God gave them this amazing ability, and unfortunately, they didn't listen to one commandment, only one commandment, and they ate from the tree of
The
knowledge of evil.
yes.
And once they did that, the great rabbi and philosopher Maimonides says, from that point on, their knowledge was no longer objective; it became subjective. Because why? From this point on, an evil force entered humanity, and nothing was clear anymore. Example: a person who's objective knows when to do things, when not to do things. Looking says searching for truth. When a person is full of emotions and things are gray, then all of a sudden, example, you don't know when to use force, not to use force. How
Mm.
so? Um, it says in the Torah, thou shalt not murder. Okay, one of the Ten Commandments. It doesn't say thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not murder.
Mm.
Now, why is this distinction? Because if a person says thou shalt not kill, then you think you can't even save yourself because of self-defense. It doesn't say thou shalt not kill. It should, again, thou shalt not murder. Because let's say this person was held up, person was being attacked, his wife, his friend, then their moral obligation is to save the person, save the person who's being attacked, even themselves. That's called self-defense. So in that case, all of a sudden, that very nature of violence, the person has to use violence to protect themselves, becomes a moral good. Now, why is this being said? Because until the eating of the fruit of good and evil, these things were very clear. But once the person ate the fruit of good and evil, at
Mm.
that moment, all these moral questions became an issue. When to use force, not to use force, when to use anger, when not to use anger, when to use laziness, when not to use laziness, all these different types of things. That's the journey of human being. That's the human being has so many um, objectives and so many subjective situations.
Mm.
Now, why bring this up? So Adam had eaten from the fruit, and God comes to Adam and says to Adam, where are you? What
Mm.
happened here? Because he was trying to invite Adam to discuss the situation what he just did, the
Mm.
terrible sin by disobeying God.
Yeah.
And instead of saying, well, I made a sin, he blamed it on his wife, Eve. And then Eve blamed it on the snake, the serpent. So God said, I see. You don't want to take responsibility. Interesting. Centuries later, famous story about King David. King David had made a sin, and God had sent the prophet Nathan, and the prophet said to him, you made a sin. And what King David said? I sinned. No excuses. Big difference. And God said, because of that reason, because you have the moral capacity, the greatness to admit that you sinned, therefore you will be the father of the Mashiach. Mashiach means the Messiah. That's the Messiah must come from King David. Now, what's the point in this? The point is as follows. God knows a person will fall. That's not the issue. But he wants the person to stand and say, I fell, I made a mistake, I
Mm.
take responsibility. I'm not going to gaslight. I'm not going to manipulate. I'm not going to
That's
swindle.
very important. Yeah.
I'm not going to try to be a snake in the grass and so forth and try to come out of it. It's an example like parents and children. If a
Mm.
child does something wrong, what does a parent want? Parent wants a child to admit the problem. That's all, right? I mean, okay, mom, I ate the food when I shouldn't eat the food. I took the cookie, I shouldn't take the cookie. That's all. I just admit it. That's all. Admit the problem, and we'll get over it. But when the mother and the father come to the child, and all of a sudden the child says, "Well, the cookie fell. It happened to be there. He did it. I didn't mean to do it." It's
Mm.
all of a sudden giving excuses. then the mother and the father says, wait a second, where's your integrity? Where's your responsibility?
Mm.
Right? So here is what the situation is as follows. So Japan, like any nation, has to take responsibility for its own history. Japan has to take,
It's not just history, but what they say as
yes,
well to
yes,
me, like even
yes.
now. I mean,
That's what I'm saying over here.
yeah, like,
It's all
you know,
connected.
yes, I mean,
But,
this statement is based on the fact, throughout history, basically. What they are saying, you know, has a lot of meanings, and, it could be bad or good. And at the same time, Japan has had a war before, and, it
mhm,
just, comes from the past as well. And I
mhm,
start to look back all of a sudden, and I start to wonder what they were actually thinking, during World
mhm,
War II and after the
mhm,
World War II. And I just, have a lot of doubts right now, really. And
mhm.
I
Right,
just cannot help feeling that way. Why do they
right.
praise Al Jazeera? Why do they report Al Jazeera every day? Why do they report Gaza Health Ministry?
Yes,
Every single day they do it.
you're right,
And
right.
today, a woman sitting on the panel discussion said, Israel is committing genocide. It's serious. Can you believe it? Okay, that's a sin to say
Mhm.
that.
Correct, correct, correct. And that's just so correct because why? That's what I mentioned before about history. When a person looks at themselves and they look at their own history,
Hmm.
and then they look at the present, and then they have to take account of themselves, and then start asking moral questions about the truth, right? So one of the reasons why this is brought up is because God wants every nation to step up and be honest about itself. So one of the things is to ask questions. That's a person can be honest about themselves and about the current political situation.
Hmm.
So if, for instance, they have to the only way to judge someone is to see both sides of the story. If you, for example, if you told me something about your friend,
Hmm.
right? My obligation is A, not to believe you. Not to believe you.
Yes,
Why?
exactly.
Because that's your side.
Hmm.
And then I'm listening to gossip. I'm listening to hearsay,
Hmm.
right? How do I know that your friend is a bad person? I don't know. You told me something about your friend.
Hmm.
Maybe your friend's a good person. You
Hmm.
told me your side of the story. So I have no idea what the truth is, right?
Yes. Hmm.
So first of all, I should not listen to anything that you tell me because I'm listening to gossip, listening to hearsay. And in the Torah language, it's called evil tongue. It's called the shon hara. What's the shon hara? It means let's say you told me something about someone else, right? And it has nothing to do with me whatsoever. Nothing to do with me whatsoever. My obligation is, first of all, not to believe you. Because why? You're ruining their person's reputation in front of me, and I wasn't there. It has nothing to do with me. Unless, example, let's assume I'm going to go into business with this person, and you tell me, listen, I want you to understand this person cheated me as a partner, and I
Hmm.
will have to warn you. That's different. Because then it has something to do with me.
Hmm.
But it has nothing to do with me, you just gossip. Now, the other hand, if you were to tell me something bad about the person,
Hmm.
then I have to go and if I'm going to be a judge, I have to listen to the other person. That's why we have a court system. What's the idea of a court system? The idea of a court system, two people come in front of a judge, right? Each one has to say their case. One person accuses the other
Hmm.
person is defending themselves, and then counter accusing the other person, right? So in a situation like that, the judge, I do not know the difference between truth and the lie. I don't know because I wasn't there. I now have to sort it out and find out what happened, when did it happen, how did it happen, and so forth. If only one person were to come into the courthouse, right, and that person would tell me their side of the story, and then I have to give a verdict, then what kind of judge am I? I'm not a good judge.
Hmm.
And basically, at this miscarriage of justice. So
Hmm.
I didn't hear that person's point of view, right? Okay. The same thing over here. If, for instance, there were Khomeini being a ruler for 45 years, that in itself already tells something's wrong. You have a country,
Oh, yes, exactly. Yeah.
right? Think about it. So you're telling me you have someone's ruling for 45 years. It's not a
Mm,
democracy. If it's not a democracy, we
mm,
know very, very well from history when
mm,
someone is an emperor, someone is a king, someone who has sole power,
mm,
most of the times that person is not a good person. Most of the time, the person has abused their power. And we look from the history of Japan.
mm,
You know, there was an emperor for for centuries.
mm.
Okay, now it is democracy since World War II, right? It's after World War II. So that being the case, then let's analyze and apply the same thing to other countries. If Khomeini and everyone knows the Islamic Republic is not a democracy, what does that tell you? Let's analyze it. That's number one. Number two, if we want to look further and say why the people over the last 45 years have been protesting and trying to protest and been killed. Number three, how are we going to let's analyze and search ourselves? We have Google, we have ChatGPT, we have the different libraries. We can have why listen to only one media, and media only tells you only one side, right? You have to always listen to different types of uh, points of view until you finally
Mm.
come to the truth. As I mentioned before, in court, if I only listen to the person who's litigant,
Mm.
is the prosecutor, I'll never know the truth. Maybe the prosecutor has set something up, because maybe the prosecutor has an agenda, right?
Mm.
So in that regard, we have to be honest and ask, who's this Khomeini,
Mm.
and why is it going on for 4 or 5 years? Why now? Why this is an example now is the United States. The United States last night has
Mm.
joined the fight. The United States blew up the nuclear facilities. Why? Why does it? Because why
The
America is
danger. It's an
today's
imminent danger, not just
yes,
against Israel, but to Europe, the United States, and Asian
right,
countries, including Japan.
exactly. Now you see people up in the stance in Japan. That's very very important. Is that Khomeini is doing this for a simple reason. He comes from an extreme um, version of Islam that
Mm.
believes that the end of the world, Armageddon, will bring redemption. See? So they have to invite in chaos. You have to invite chaos. When chaos is invited, then redemption will happen. Okay?
Mm.
So that being the case, then we have to see that the point is also that Islam, in terms, let's say, what do Japan, if if Khomeini would have his power, the Japanese should not be so naive and innocent to believe that all of a sudden Khomeini will love the Japanese and make become friends with Japanese. No, they would come into Japan and they would convert everyone to Islam.
See, Ambassador Danny Dannon, he was actually speaking in the United Nations. He's the ambassador to the, and he was actually making a very important, an interesting point, calling out, Iran as wolves. You know,
Right.
these are wolves in the suit. That's what, the Japanese uh, um, exemplify this communist China's diplomats. They come,
Mm-hmm.
not to be friendly, but they
Mm-hmm.
want to take over everything, you
Right.
know. I mean, they have a purpose to do something very harmful against, uh, they don't choose any method, like they don't choose any method. They just do anything, take
Mm-hmm.
away from people, and
Mm-hmm.
that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very strange to me. We have this situation with China, but I'm not exactly sure how many people are aware of this. But, China is a real threat to Japan, and same
Mm-hmm.
with North Korea. You know,
Right.
and see, like, I mean, we have wolves already.
Right. True.
So it's, I don't see, and it's very strange that, like, so all of a sudden, for example, about Iran, oh, it's a sovereign state and we are not supposed to talk about politics, the Japanese journalists say. And then, on the other hand, when they talk about Israel, they start to say, oh, they have a lot of domestic problems. For example, there are a lot of protests, and Netanyahu is the problem. I mean, why do they judge a political leader of Israel? And what about Khamenei? I mean, Khamenei is the worst thing in the world. I mean, Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been working 24/7 right now to
Yes,
save the nation. I mean,
right.
and Israel has been, exemplified like, oh, they're like Russia. I don't understand the whole story and whole point, what is happening in their head, really. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
very sorry. Like, I very sound aggressive today, but I'm very angry at some point. And I hope that you could, yeah, I appreciate that, you explain always to, on my podcast. But, I was actually relieved that, photo was destroyed by the
Hmm.
United, yes, States military, like
Hmm.
very smoothly and very fast,
Right,
very fast.
right. I
Mhm.
mean, if for example, the fact that, let's say this way, you can see that Khomeini has been sending ballistic missiles into civilian population, not military targets.
Mm,
Now, people say, well, what Israel and what's going on in Gaza?
mm.
Well, people don't understand the following. Every place in Gaza is a military site. What does that mean?
There are tunnels,
Because
entrance. Yeah.
because
Hmm.
Hamas has planted military weapons everywhere. It's like basically a person putting a RPG in an ambulance, and now what happens is the ambulance is driving across the whole city, shooting people, and in that ambulance is a patient. So you don't want to kill the patient, but if you don't take out the terrorists with the RPG, then
Mm.
everybody in the area is going to be killed, right? So you're in a moral quandary. That's a situation where the UN, so to speak, how
Mm.
has allowed Hamas to do what they did for all these years. So the UN also has to take responsibility.
Yeah,
UNRWA,
they are complicit. You
they're
know,
complicit.
I,
That's right. They're complicit in this because they should have stopped this and they should
they
demand
have the
and they should
responsibility, and they
exactly.
are guilty as well
Of
to
course, they're
help,
guilty. Of
funded
course,
support for years.
and they don't want to admit it.
Yeah.
That's the hypocrisy here. So now, suppose this way, Iran is sending missiles into civilian areas.
Hmm.
In those civilian areas, they're not military bases.
Yeah,
So you
it's
see already,
intentional. It's
it's intentional.
intentional. And another
Exactly.
thing, why I'm angry, the way they make propaganda, the Iran, this Iran
Hmm.
Khamenei regime, it's about the same as the Soviet propaganda. And
Exactly.
what Russia did, the same thing.
Right.
At the beginning of 2022, they said, you know, this building had a military site, which was a theater, for example, in Mariupol.
Hmm. Hmm.
There were only civilians and children.
Hmm.
That's what Khamenei's doing against.
Right.
I mean,
Correct.
it's very hard for me. It's very difficult for me to understand, these Japanese people not understanding the situation at all. And they talk about Ukraine in a different manner. I mean, I just do not understand what is going on. It's really hard for me to understand. And at the same time, um, I feel some danger, really. I mean, in a way, what is going to happen in Japan at some point, really? I mean, I cannot be optimistic about this because, misunderstanding the situation like this, it's a very, very, very dangerous situation, really,
Yes, it is.
to me.
It is. That's the sad part of
Mm,
people be tricked by the wolf in sheep's clothing.
exactly. Yeah.
It's like, it's like the of famous story of people of the I should say what's the right word? The famous story of a person who was dressed up to be a very charming person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very charming, very delightful, very, very, very outgoing. And lo and behold, this person had been a scoundrel. So let me give you an example. This really happened in South Africa about 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the story goes as follows. There was a woman,
Mm-hmm.
about 20 years old, very charming, true story. Her name was Elizabeth. And Elizabeth had come into the community in South Africa, and she was saying that she wanted to become Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And she did everything right. Was very, very pro-Jewish and very pro-Israel and so forth. And she went through the whole year of conversion. And eventually, at the end of the conversion, you have to go and meet and be in front of the rabbinical court. And the rabbis have to test you and see if you really sincerely want to become Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was the person who told me the story was the head of the rabbinical court, Rabbi K. His name was wonderful man, and he had not been feeling well that day, and he had asked for Elizabeth to come to his home to make the court in the house, which is allowed, and he had three judges there, and he asked her, "Do you still have any feelings for any other religion, especially for Christianity?" You know, she couldn't give an answer, nothing, couldn't give an answer. He was a very mild-mannered man. Again, he asked a question, and she didn't give him an answer. And he's turning to the judges to the left and to the right of him, and still no answer. Eventually, this mild-mannered man banged on the table and said, "Elizabeth, yes or no? Do you still have feelings for your previous religion?" You know, all of a sudden, that moment, tears came down her eyes, and she said she can't deny it, following that she is a spy. She was a missionary, and her job was to come into the community,
Mm-hmm.
pretend that she wants to become Jewish, in
Mm-hmm.
order to convert people to Christianity. Now, so you see over here a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't tell the truth in the beginning that she's really a Christian and she really wants to convert people to Christianity. She pretended that she wants to become Jewish, go inside the community, and then convert people. That's a wolf in sheep's clothing. Okay. Now, the story gets even worse. Why? Because there was a young man who fell in love with her, and he was about to marry her, and then he found out who she was, a trickster. Now, this life story is a life story that's replicable to many, many people. Well, they tell you one thing and then they do something else. The hypocrisy, manipulation, the gaslighting, and so forth. This is part of the whole agenda of the communist takeover of the world. Yuri Bezimov, there was a KGB agent. You could see it on YouTube. In 1984, he had explained and told about how the communists come into a certain area. What they do is they don't control people from the outside. Meaning what? They go into an area and see if an area is morally bankrupt. There's no morals, no religion, there's
Mm-hmm.
no ethics. And then they see and they use freedom against the person. In other words, they say, in example, you have to have freedom of this and freedom of that and so forth, to the
Mm-hmm.
point that you become so confused, you don't know what's right and what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Going back again to the story of Adam and Eve, good and evil. You're so confused what's right and wrong, up and down is up. Like the famous book of George Orwell, 1984, black is white
Oh,
and white is
yes.
black. Exactly, you don't know what truth is anymore. You get so confused.
Mm-hmm.
So you get so confused that you cannot judge anymore. And then they tell you even worse, don't judge. You shouldn't judge. It's not the right thing to do. So if you don't judge, you can't come to moral standards, right? And so they break you down. This part of the way that they can now, the manipulator comes in and uses this person as a useful idiot until one day they get rid of him. So now going back to applicable to Khomeini, when the revolution in 1969 happened, the Islamic Republic used the communists. The communists said, "Oh, wow, we're going to be united now with Khomeini, and we'll take down the Shah. The Shah represents what? Represents the bourgeoisie. Represents the the capitalist system and so forth. All that stuff. That's propaganda." And so the Islamic Republic said to the communists, "Sure, let's work together." Once they took over, guess what? They killed all the left-wing communists. Again, point is wolf in sheep's clothing. It's been now this type of mythology is used by all nations basically, and by many political groups in order to trick you into fall into their trap. The same thing over here is that you mentioned before about the genocide. Now, what is genocide? Genocide means that there is an intentional, active, proactive movement
Hmm.
of ideology in order to rid someone of another nation, right? Okay. So, first of all, how could it be a genocide if Israel is defending itself? Number one. Two, how could it be a genocide if Israel has all the power? As you can see clearly now, we're taking on Iran. We could actually had wiped out at Gaza a year and a half ago, easily. We didn't do that. Three, there not only that, but there are studies saying now, and you can Google yourself, not just your audience members, that they see that the population in Gaza does not decrease. It's the same, if not more, as it was even before a year and a half ago. No
It has
genocide.
been increased. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. In a year and a half. In a year and a half. So if there's a genocide, people should be dying, left and right. 4, 5. The numbers that have been killed in Gaza, many of them are terrorists. They're not the civilian population. Next, as well, is that in terms of the genocide, right? Are the people being taken on cattle cars, being sent to concentration camps like the Nazis did to the Jews?
Exactly.
No.
That's what I really,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So you see over
Well,
here, it's not a genocide. Clearly, we are defending ourselves
hmm,
against a genocidal group called Hamas.
hmm.
The same way, why is the United States defending itself against Iran? Because Iran, Khomeini, not the people of Iran, want to commit a worldwide genocide.
Yeah,
Meaning what they want to use it, they
that,
want to use it as
yeah,
a bomb.
yeah, that
Exactly.
regime is a terrorist regime, really,
Hmm.
to me.
Exactly. Exactly correct. Exactly correct.
I mean, they took over the country basically, you know.
They did for
Yeah.
45 years already. For 45 years. The brutality they've done to women, the brutality they've done to people who won't follow their way of life, the
Mm,
brutality they've done to political prisoners, the amount of weapons they've sent around the world in terms of Houthis, the Syrians, the Lebanese, and in terms of Hezbollah, the proxies, Hamas. They're responsible for having October 7th. They're
mm,
responsible for all the killings that happen to the Gazans themselves. They don't, and look, in fact, 2 days ago, they launched 2 missiles that hit 2 mosques in Haifa. So
yeah.
they themselves they destroyed 2 Islamic centers of worship, right? The mosques. So you see how much they care about Muslims. They don't. And not only that, more than that, they are Shiite. Shiite and Sunni for 1,000 years have been having an internal fight, a civil war between themselves.
Yeah.
The Sunni believe that Muhammad is the last prophet, and the Shiite believe that Ali, the son-in-law of Muhammad, the brother son-in-law, is Ali is the last prophet of Muhammad. So that being the case, then you have a religious war between the two.
Mm,
So for the Shiite to kill the Sunni
mm,
is not a problem. When I speak to Arabs here in Israel, they're very frightened of Iran, very frightened because they know that the Shiite want to kill the Sunni. See, but again, no one outside the conversation knows about this. You only see one picture when it has different types of multi-layered components to it.
Yeah. It's, another thing is that, I admit the fact in the past. Well, the Japanese government may have saved Jewish people from, like Russian Empire,
Hmm.
Eastern Europe, to avoid anti-Semitism. And,
Right.
but on the other hand, you know, now like the media, translate anti-Semitism into Japanese. But it sounds like they totally misunderstand the term. They are using the term without understanding it, or they, uh, you know, it has a history, of course, of, anti-Semitism. I mean, it's not like the last 2 years, but it's
Hmm.
thousands of years of anti-Semitism. I mean,
Hmm.
Jewish people know about it through history, of what has been done to them, really, in my sense, really. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, it's not, I know that it's not just October 7th, but at the same time, that was a very, very horrific crime to me, really. And at the same time, I really started to wonder, um, the words that, come out of people's mouth that
Right.
actually really matters. It has a heavy weight, it's not just, something that we just come, we just say and forget about it, but,
Right.
it has, it they have to be responsible for what they're saying. I mean, the
Hmm.
media, and also sometimes, those people, not just media, but those who talk about Israel as a crime organization or something like that.
Right.
They need to understand what they're saying in the first place.
Right. True. Very true. Very
I'm
true.
just, I have been thinking about this, and I cannot be optimistic about this at all anymore.
Hmm. Right.
This is serious.
Very serious. Very, very serious. And that's um that's why your podcast is so important. What you're doing is a very, very special thing. You're doing holy work, you're doing good work, moral work, and you're trying to bring the truth. And little by little, what you're doing is you want to educate, and you're being very courageous about it. It takes someone. It only people of your stature, of your moral and ethical compass, is the one to change the world. It's very hard. Question about it. It takes a great deal of insight, and it takes also stamina, and
Yeah.
to fight against people who don't want to hear the truth. So I commend you for that, really very much. It's really more power to you.
Yeah.
And your listeners, those who change their minds, and
I hope, people understand what is going on really. And,
yeah,
for example, I really appreciate you for coming to my podcast because, what you say, represents the religion as well. I mean, you're not a hater of, Muslims at all because your boss is, for example, at the in the police.
that's right, that's right.
Druze, Muslims,
Jews,
these people.
Jews, yeah, Christians,
I
right?
mean,
Sure.
yeah, in Israel, people live peacefully, and I have been discussing with, other guests over this, but having a sense of like, if we do identity politics, like I am the Japanese, you are different, something like this. I mean, it all of a sudden may seem like, you know, you are very exclusive against someone. It,
Hmm.
I talk about myself as Japanese to exemplify and just to use some kind of analogy or to give examples so that
Yeah,
people understand. I mean, it's not very easy for people to understand, just by listening to what people think sometimes. I
yeah.
mean, so. that's what, that's what really matters to me. But, at the same time, just, calling myself, this is me, me, and, and not understanding someone else's value. I mean, that's very, very, mm, I guess, like against humanity, really.
Hmm.
And that's
Right.
what is happening in Japan.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'm not saying everyone. However,
Right.
there are people, I cannot deny it now because there exist such people. That means that there are anti-Semitism in Japan.
Hmm. Yes, exactly. Then that's become it's so important about you say
So,
um, viewing each other and understanding each other's culture and
mm,
so forth. That's why you asked me to speak about Shabbat and so forth. What
yes.
did you what did you want to know?
So like they're interesting, like, customs, like for example, like money is not handled on Shabbat, or, this is something I really feel about. Like Jewish people have suffered for their loyalty to Shabbat because, the Yom Kippur, all these, many wars that Israel has fought, there is a surprise attack on Shabbat. Really.
Hmm.
I mean, that seems like a testing, really, in a sense. But it's not, I don't know where it came from. However, it's a hardship that, the Jewish people, tries to maintain a tradition, but someone wants to invade it, really, in a sense, that value, you know, with other values.
Right.
And so, it's very, interesting is not a very good term to use. However, I believe that Jewish people have thrived, you know, by having Shabbat near to me. So, 6 days, people work very hard, I cannot generalize it, but Jewish people are hard workers, really, to me. in a sense. And, on Shabbat, people have one day off, like, and it's a special day. And so, I mean, I was, reading a lot of posts, and there was a post that, there were posts that were saying that, the flights to be back to, or the service to get Israeli people abroad back to, Israel during Shabbat is going to be operated. So I think that it's, um, you know, probably, I guess a lot of people to people, um, you know, maintaining tradition of Shabbat may be important, but this is a very important time for the Jewish people and Israeli people. And so, what do you think? Okay, there are a lot of Jewish people too listening to this. I mean, is an important, yes, something important for them to keep in mind, you know.
So Shabbat, first of all, is the essence of the Jewish way of life. It's more a tradition. It's a
Mm,
commandment. Now, people believe that there's only 10 commandments. 10 commandments is just part of the overall 613 commandments. The person will look at the Torah, you'll see, then start counting all the commandments in the Torah. You'll see the 613.
mm,
The 10 are the famous ones because that's when God revealed himself to all humanity and through the through the uh, through the messenger Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe is how we say Hebrew. Rabbeinu means our teacher,
mm,
our master. And this holy man Moses, the one who was able to make the connection, so to speak, between God and humanity because he was such a holy human being. Now, the Sabbath itself is a testimony that the Creator, God, is the Creator, and He created the world within 6 days. Now, the idea of the fact that there's a Creator is something revolutionary. in world history, in world reality, in world religion, because other religions believe the universe was eternal, or the universe had no moral compass to this, and so forth.
Mm.
With the Torah, with God is telling us a statement, and we, the Jewish people, took upon ourselves that we believe that that there is a creator, B, that the creator has a plan, C, that the creator created the world ex nihilo, means from nothing, something from nothing. That's a revolutionary concept. It's so revolutionary that philosophers until this day, and even scientists, are still trying to grasp the idea. That's become the Big Bang was such a revolutionary scientific breakthrough when they realized there is a Big Bang. And now there's more ideas about Big Bang and so forth, the universe coming and how it started and so forth. People still don't understand how creation really happened.
Mm.
So when a Jewish person fulfills the Sabbath, he's fulfilling basically all the commandments in one. Meaning what? He is saying that A, there is a creator. B, the creator is a supervisor. C, the creator creates. D, that there has to be a day out of 7 where one becomes united and respectful to the creator. Now, the Sabbath itself is very important. It was given to the Jewish people as a present. What does that mean? Who is a Jewish person? Anyone who fulfills and does all the commandments and takes upon themselves the yoke of heaven can become Jewish. So we're not a people per se in terms only of genetics. We're
Mm.
people that are part of the people. Famous example, the famous the one of the greatest of all rabbis was called Onkelos. Onkelos was the nephew of the Emperor Hadrian, and he himself became a Jewish man. Was so strange, was so great, became a great rabbi. To this day, we use his translation of the Bible, the Torah, that was written 2,000 years ago. We put it together in the language of Aramaic, we learn every single day. So there are many great rabbis
Mm-hmm.
who either were converts or came from converts and so forth. In fact, the whole Jewish people at Mount Sinai converted at Mount Sinai when God revealed himself. So to become Jewish, if a person goes through the process of becoming Jewish, it
Mm-hmm.
takes 2 years, 3 years, depends on the person, depends on the rabbinical court they're with, and so forth. They pass everything, they can become Jewish. So first of all, we're not an exclusive club. You know, as it comes, there are Japanese Jews, there are Korean Jews, there are Black Jews,
Mm-hmm.
there are Indian Jews, and so forth. Now, that's number one. Number two, once a person becomes Jewish, then they have the commandment of the Sabbath. Now, a non-Jewish person doesn't have the commandment of the Sabbath. They have only the 7 commandments that God gave to Noah. When Noah came out of the flood, he gave 7 commandments to the non-Jewish world. And one of them, example, not to commit murder, not to do anything sexually immoral, adultery,
Mm-hmm.
not to cheat. Next, not to cheat, not to steal.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next is not to take an animal's limb while the animal's alive and tear it off and eat it. That's very cruel to the animal. Don't be cruel. Next is not to do any forms of idolatry, no idol worshiping and so forth. Next is not to use God's name to curse. And finally is to create a court system, a system of judges whereby to enforce the other 6 commandments. Now, if a non-Jew fulfills these 7 commandments that was given to Noah, he also or she also gets a place in heaven and so forth. Okay. So now we, the Jewish people, were given another 606 commandments because we had revelation at Mount Sinai. And part of the commandment is to keep the Sabbath. The idea of the Sabbath is whereby you don't do any creative work on the Sabbath itself. Now,
Oh, creative work.
creative
I
work.
see.
What is creative work? Let me give you an example of creative work.
Mm-hmm.
Creative work is where it's something you build. You take something physical
Mm-hmm.
and you change it. Like example, if I take a piece of wood and I were to cut it and then make something out of it, that's creative work, right? For instance, let's say I even turn a light switch, right? A light switch, I'm creating a circuit. It's creative work. So creative work has nothing to do with the amount of sweat you're doing. It has to do with the amount of creativity you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
There are 39 categories of work that we cannot do in Sabbath. These 39 categories are work that has to do with something that you create. For instance, let's say take
I
glue a tissue.
I read that, agriculture, is one of the things, in this book that I was reading about.
Not
This is
agriculture per
about like,
se.
mhm,
It's not agriculture per se. What is there were 39 activities that we've
mhm,
done to create the tabernacle.
mhm,
And one of them example is you need to make plants. From the plants you have dyes. From the dyes you'll be able to color and so forth. And
mhm,
so these things are again part of the sets of activities that were done in order to create. So for the Sabbath day itself, we are now allowed to create. During the 6 days of the week, God says, create as much as you want, be part of the world and so forth,
mhm,
make the world better. God never made the world perfect. People have to understand that. This is
mhm,
not a perfect world. God wants humanity to participate and make the world perfect. So when people say, well, if God is so great, why the world's not perfect? Because God didn't make the world perfect. He didn't want to make it perfect. He wants us human beings to complete his creation. Now, what happens is when you have the 6 days of creation,
mhm,
when we have to create ourselves, using our brain power, using our artistic abilities, whatever the case may be, we enhance the world,
mhm,
physical world. So on the seventh day,
mhm,
Shabbat day, go into a zone. The zone is whereby now we recognize who is the creator, God himself, the king, the universe. So what's so serious is the Sabbath is that there are penalties for not fulfilling the Sabbath. Now, why is that so? Because we, the Jewish people, are saying a statement to the whole world that there is a king of the universe, that the king cares about good and evil, that the king cares about humanity, that the king wants human beings to strive, right? So for that 26 hours of the Sabbath itself, we stay away from all these things that have to do with there's a creative world. That's why we won't have smartphones, and we won't engage in
mhm,
money and so forth. And there's many things that we are allowed to do because again, to do parameters of creative activities, which it can go to another podcast because it's a very long list. So by doing this, we're saying the statement that not only are we going to sit back and enjoy God's creation,
mhm,
but we're going to also coronate the king once a week. By having the Sabbath, we're recognizing the King of the universe. So it's a day of coronation. It's a day of joy. It's a day of delight. It's a day of whereby we're with our families. It's a day of whereby we take the physical world and we enhance it to an even higher level of holiness. The idea of Torah is to bridge heaven and earth together, is to take the physical world and to enhance it. Example, a person can eat an apple. Okay. But if you have, the question is, what's your intention before you eat the apple? Is your intention to make the apple a holy thing? And how do you make an apple a holy thing? By recognizing the holy essence inside the apple, by saying, making a blessing. I bless God, the King of the universe, who's created the fruit of the tree, right? The same thing with the Sabbath itself. We're blessing God and recognizing God, that God has created a, a world and the Jewish people. And as mentioned before, if a person wants to become Jewish, they can become Jewish. It's not making a statement. I recognize there is a creator, and the creator is my king, and therefore I will fulfill my creator's commandments by resting. Now, here what's so amazing is which king, if you think about it, commands you to rest?
mhm.
The kings command you
Always
to work,
work.
work, 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 work. Here, the king of the universe commands us to rest. I want you to rest. And if you don't rest, I'll punish you. Wow. Is that amazing? But
Mm,
God is telling us, you, if you want to work, you can work 6 days. But on the
mm,
seventh day, you have to rest. You must rest. You have to rejuvenate your soul. You have to rejuvenate your mind.
Mm.
You have to rejuvenate your perception of the world.
Mm.
Okay? You have to rejuvenate your connection to God. Rejuvenate your relationship to your family. And also, what happens is a person gets to reflect and realize what he or she can do better, become better. Every single week, every Sabbath is a certain way of repenting, of looking inside yourself and saying, "Oh, I could have done this better. I could have done that better," and so forth. And it's a time of 26 hours of delight, 26 hours of rejoicing, 26 hours of being with your family, 26 hours of being with the Creator, 26 hours of taking stock of yourself in a certain way, 26 hours of learning the Holy Torah
Mm.
and understanding of what's your potential, what you can do. And that shift in time, an island of time, is now changes your mindset. And of course, if a person has gone through any tragedy,
Mm.
any type of upheaval, that the Sabbath over there gives them a chance to reflect. It gives her a chance to reflect how they can change their lives for the better.
Mm.
And all of us, no person who can't get better and better and better. So the Sabbath is
Mhm.
opportunity to recreate, to reconnect to God, to oneself, one's family, one's purpose. So there's a famous statement: not only have the Jewish people have protected the Sabbath or guarded the Sabbath, but the Sabbath has protected and guarded the Jewish people. And that's one of the reasons why we're able to survive all these 2,000 years of incredible oppression and depression and Holocaust and pogroms and anti-Semitism, because all of a sudden, for that 26 hours, we go into a different world. Now, you mentioned before about people attacking us on the Sabbath. So,
Yeah.
one of the
Mhm.
important points for the Sabbath is that a Jewish man or woman is commanded to fulfill the Sabbath to the point of whereby that if they have to save someone's life or save their own life,
Mhm.
they're allowed to break the Sabbath in order to have another Sabbath. Because if they die, they can't fulfill another Sabbath, right? So, therefore, it's very, very important. It's called pikuach nefesh, saving of one's soul, saving of one's life or someone's life. So, for that reason, that we find in the Torah tells us, and it's very important. People understand they're not one Torah, but two Torahs. And what does that mean? There's the written Torah and the oral Torah. The written Torah is what God told Moses to write,
Mhm.
and then the oral Torah is the explanation of what it says and what it means in the Torah itself. And an example is, imagine as a journalist, you go to a conference and the speaker's speaking. Of course, you're going to write down your notes. You're not writing every single word verbatim, are you? No, you're writing notes. Those notes are basically reminders of what the speaker told you, and what was the whole issue about. So every time you read a note, it gives you the ability to remember what was the conversation. So the same thing we hear, the written Torah are notes that God told Moshe is Moses, and and the same token, the oral law is explanation of those notes. 2,000 years ago, because the Roman oppression was so great in the land of Israel,
Mhm.
Judah the prince, Rabbi Yehuda,
Mhm.
saw that special emergency situation whereby the oral law had to be written down, and that became known as the Talmud, the Gemara. So, therefore, basically, if you think about it, the oral law has been written down for 2,000 years. So, part of the point is that Torah is telling us to fulfill the Sabbath, you have to have two aspects. You have to have the written Torah and the oral Torah.
Mhm.
The oral Torah explains to us how to fulfill the Sabbath. Now, part of the oral Torah tells us that if a person's life is in danger,
Mhm.
you're allowed to break the Sabbath to save the person. So therefore, There, for example, the planes now flying the Sabbath to save Jewish citizens
Mm-hmm.
because their life is in danger. Their life is actually in danger. They can be killed by anti-Semitic mobs. They can be killed by, by extremists and so forth. So
Yes.
therefore, we have to. There's a situation where they can become hostages. The situation they could be murdered, and situations they can be attacked viciously against women can be attacked women and so forth. So our obligation now is to save their lives. So therefore, because the Torah gives us permission, so therefore we're allowed to break the Sabbath to save our fellow citizens, our brothers and sisters, our Jewish people.
Mm.
That's why we're able to have these special types um, of planes, or so to speak, safety and rescue missions
Mhm.
done by planes transportation to save Jewish lives.
I see. So, like, like when in the family gathering, what is probably the important, you know, I guess like maybe something important for people to maybe, Jewish people or non-Jewish people to understand, you know,
Mm-hmm.
is, uh I have to say that uh probably like maybe you could give examples but like to Israeli people right now it's a very difficult time, civilian complexes have been attacked, but it's they're doing it during the Shabbat as well, right? I mean like I mean
Happened to us. Happened to me last
yes,
night. The night,
right,
48 hours ago,
I mean
36 hours ago, it
mm,
happened. We had 3 o'clock in the morning, siren go off during the
mhm,
Sabbath. We immediately had to go to the bomb shelter
mhm,
and stay there for a while. We had everything prepared before the Sabbath in terms
mhm,
of light, air conditioned, so forth. In case it's not really air conditioned, it's a fan. It's a big, nice big fan, air conditioned.
mhm.
With many people inside the bomb shelter.
Mhm.
And of course, we had our telephones open beforehand because we take precautions. And also because of the emergency situation, you're allowed to have the telephone on. Again, it has to do with the life safety situation.
Mhm.
So we're doing our best we can to fulfill the Sabbath, not to break the Sabbath. But when it comes to point of emergency, you know, we run to the bomb shelter. It's very important. Unfortunately, people who have not had bomb shelters and have been were are hit by the missiles, they lost their lives. Very, very sad, very tragic. Lost their lives, or had gone through tremendous, um, serious wounds and so forth, injuries.
Yes.
So, we deal in a situation living in two worlds. See, and the very important thing is how the parents handle the situation. So I had my friends and I start dancing in the bunker in
Mhm.
bomb shelter to relieve the children's anxiety, right?
Mhm.
So by making the situation, they know be happy, everything's fine, God's watching us, be confident, everything is good.
What did you sing, by the way?
What, what
What
do we
did you
sing?
sing? May I ask what you
We
sang?
sing, yeah, we sang Ashreinu, how good it is to be the Jewish people, how wonderful it is to be part of this our mission, how wonderful it is that we get to serve God, how wonderful that we belong to a tradition, uh, 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 a national um, mission of bringing light to the world for the last few dozen years and so forth. So give confidence and so forth. You know, everything in life, everything in life is a challenge, right?
Yes.
That person can see that moment as a terrible situation or opportunity, right?
Hmm.
Now it takes a strong mindset to see something as an opportunity when a person is going through tragedy. It takes a very strong mindset. But that comes from years of training, of a Torah training and so forth, learning, believing in God.
Mhm.
understanding this, and also persons putting the dots together.
Mhm.
Person looks life, they can see those there are all the dots fit
Mhm.
nicely. That person needed that moment, that thing in their life at that moment for that for a reason, to wake them up, to rectify them, to get better and so forth. Not to
Mhm.
break them, but to rebuild them, rebuild them. Sometimes you have to, so to speak, go through a hard time to get to a better time, right? So it's a rebuilding process. So here, we try to make the atmosphere of the Sabbath, so even the situation can be very delightful and very happy and so forth. And then, after the sirens are off and we're waiting 10, 20 minutes, whatever the case may be, then we go back to our homes again,
Mhm.
go back to standing to see the world in a positive light. That's why it's very important, by the way. A person has this mindset that God is in control of everything. When a
Mhm.
person doesn't have that mindset, then the anxiety, then there's worry, that then there is nervousness, there's madness, in fact, right?
Mhm.
But when you see that God controls everything, that
Mhm.
God is, that there's a reason for every single moment, and God only wants to do good for the person, then a person sees that he's being carried, so to speak, in his or her mission in life, and then they rise up to a new occasion, right? So it's amazing to see the Israeli mothers how they carry their children, to the holding their children, and and interesting enough, because now again, if you're seeing those who are religious, and
Mhm.
even those not religious, but especially those who are religious,
Mhm.
they have a certain confidence,
Mhm.
and the children feel it.
Mhm.
The children feel that okay, they're being protected, everything will be fine, everything's good, and so forth.
Mhm.
So here's another way of a person be able to survive all of this, even in the Sabbath itself.
Mhm.
Now, the Sabbath, mentioned before about family. Family is very, very important in the Sabbath. To have wife and children together and sit by the table, and there's the festive wine and festive bread,
Mhm.
and then the meal, and to this learning, discussing of Torah concepts and Torah ethics and morals, and sing songs, right? These are wonderful, beautiful things that
Mhm.
a person has and to strive for. I mean, some Jewish people who never had a Sabbath and they come to experience Sabbath, they get enriched by it. And those who are non-Jewish many times say the reason they became Jewish
Mhm.
is because they saw the incredible unity and
Oh.
the family interaction, you
Mhm.
know, parents and children, and between the children, and that enhanced them, and they saw there's a different life out there. So that was able to convince them to become Jewish. So this, an example of that. So the
Mhm.
Sabbath is an island of time where a person can refine themselves and reconnect. It's a wonderful moment every week.
I see. Well, I mean, lighting the candle like means a lot to probably like during Shabbat, right? Also, like,
Well, if you light the candles before the Sabbath, because you
mhm.
can't light candles on the Sabbath, not allowed to light fire on the Sabbath. So now lighting the candles can be done by men or women,
Mhm.
but specifically it's done by women.
Mhm.
Meaning what? If a woman, if a man has a wife,
Mhm.
right, or the mother of the house,
Mhm.
the commandment is usually given to it belongs to the woman. Now, if a man is by himself, then he
Mhm.
would light candles by himself. Okay? The idea of the candles is for two reasons. One, to honor the Sabbath, because when you have a lit room, right, it
Mhm.
brings honor, it brings a certain atmosphere of holiness.
Mhm.
It shows a amount of respect. It changes the whole atmosphere. The other reason is because it also creates in Hebrew called shalom bayit. Shalom Bayit is whereby there's peace in the house. Because why? If it was dark, people trip. People trip, people have accidents and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's in that regard. But the other reason also, you're also lighting the candle because you want to usher in the Sabbath queen. See, there's a queen, so to speak, called the Sabbath, and you're asking her to come into your home.
Mm-hmm.
And so by ushering in that moment, you're inviting holiness, light of holiness into the house.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the woman is blessing the candles and then she's praying for everything that she needs to pray for her husband, for her children, for herself, for the Jewish people, for the world, whatever she wants to pray for. It's a moment of serenity. It's a moment of holiness. It's very, very special. And so it enhances. And from that point on, the Sabbath is basically coming into. And there's more details and so forth that we can another podcast if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
But it changes the whole atmosphere. And literally, you'll see people, Jewish people around the world, some who convert to Judaism on the Sabbath. Their soul literally changes. It's a certain type of calmness they have, a certain type of wholeness they have, the attitude they have. It's totally different. It's a wonderful thing, very mystical experience.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, like, I mean, thank you so much for like, rushing you to, come to my podcast. But, it sounded, like this Shabbat was, had a lot of meanings to Jewish people to me
Oh yes,
because, I hope that, this war is, going to, not just, end, but, to bring peace to Israel, really,
hmm
finally.
I
And
hope that.
and
Yeah,
what I really believe is that, it's not just about political ideology, Zionism, but, it's very important for people, Jewish people to have Israel. I mean, there is no such discrimination as, the newspaper describes. And at the same, yeah, I don't believe that Jewish people discriminate people, basically. I mean,
no,
it's not, that, very inclusive people to me.
extremely, extremely, very, 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 very. No,
Right?
we don't absolutely.
Yeah.
If
So,
we were, such as people, then we wouldn't have 60 different cultures in our country. So we have Jews all over the world. And they all
mhm.
came back in the last, 150 years. So we're not at all. In fact, we're the only nation in the history of the world that brought people of color, black people, into freedom. The only nation, only because we brought the Jews of Ethiopia in the 1980s,
Oh, yes.
operation called Solomon, um, uh, into Israel because our brothers and sisters, Ethiopian Jews, who were being persecuted by non-Jewish Ethiopians,
Uh-huh.
we saw they were being about to be killed and so forth. We literally brought them in and airlifted them into Israel. And interesting is the following: the Ethiopian Jews, the black Jews, never saw white Jews. So they never knew that white Jews existed. So here you have white Jews and black Jews, and meeting also the Yemenite Jews who are like a little darker. Everyone coming together, see? And we
Yeah,
have,
that's,
yeah,
see,
we
like,
have, yeah,
yes, I guess, like,
we
Israel is rich in culture.
very rich in culture. Exactly. And then I mentioned before, anyone can become Jewish.
Yeah.
And at the same token, of course, if they have to go through an Orthodox conversion, they have to learn the
Hmm.
Torah, written
Yes.
Torah, oral Torah, be tested for a year or something like that to see they're committed to keep Sabbath, keep
Mm-hmm.
kosher laws, to fulfill the blessings. It's a hard life. Question about it. Very hard. It's a hard life. The 630 commandments. The same token, it's a very rich, enriching life. You know? And it not and then and people that's why we always say to someone who becomes Jewish in the beginning, are you sure we push you away 3 times?
Mm-hmm.
We push you away. Why push you away? Because we want to understand that it's a hard life. It's 630 commandments.
Mhm.
And we don't want you just to become Jewish overnight. Because
Mhm.
first of all, are you becoming Jewish because you want to get married? That's not right. You have to
Mhm.
become Jewish because you believe in God and you want to fulfill His Torah. Are you becoming Jewish because you have an ulterior motive or ulterior motive? No, again, because you believe in God, and also you become Jewish because you want to say something about to the world. I want to fulfill a holy life of 613 commandments,
Mhm.
613 ways to interact with God. So therefore, it's a hard life, and we don't want to put someone in a situation unless they can handle it. That's how come we push them away 3 times. And after we do that, and if they still want to, then we teach them. And then we see after a year and a half that they were very sincere. And then we go through a whole procedure, how make the final conversion, and then they're Jewish. So,
Interesting.
and and, and
Yeah,
then and then
mhm.
and then what happens is that's a come you have this as mentioned before about this so to speak unity in Israel. The same token, why Israel is so important. I mean, there are 240 nations in the world. 240 nations in the world means 240 non-Jewish nations.
Mhm.
There's 23 Arab states,
Mhm.
57 Muslim states, right?
Mhm.
There are many Christian states,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? There are many there is a Buddhist state and there's a Hindu state and everything else. And you're telling me that one little Jewish state
Mhm.
of basically 8 million Jews,
Mhm.
another 2 million non-Jewish people, 10 million altogether, doesn't have the right to exist? If that's not hypocrisy, if that's not one word evil
Mhm.
and selfishness, then
Mhm.
I don't know what is. That really is. That's a very, very selfish approach, a very selfish attitude to not allow the Jewish people, the indigenous people of the land for over 3,000 years to have their state. And anyone who can say such a thing and still be against us and ask for us to wipe away our state, which is genocide, real genocide,
Mhm.
then that person has to look deep inside themselves and say to themselves and say that they are not only, but they are doing evil. Because if you want to get rid of the only Jewish state in the world, and while you're allowing 239 non-Jewish states
Mhm.
have their own religion, have their own way of life, but not allowing the Jewish people, a minority in the world community, to have their nation, their
Mhm.
nation state, I must tell you, that's an act of evil, and you should change their ways and repent
Mhm.
and call it what it is, hypocrisy. And if
Yes.
a person wants to be a real human being, they
Mhm.
have to say we acknowledge that Jewish people have a right to their land, and
Mhm.
not only the ancestral land, but the eternal land. Been there for 3,000 years. We proof from archaeology, proof from literature, proof
Mhm.
from books of history from other people's nation, from other people, and just fairness, justice, and we never stole anyone's land. You can simply read there that we've been there for 3,000 years.
Mhm.
So out of that, person should be morally honest and say simply, you, the Jewish people, have a right to live in your own land, have your own nation state, like any other human being has the right to live and have their own nation state.
Yes.
Yes.
So, see, like, it's a very hard time. And, at the same time, as you say, this is, this kind of like, you don't have, right to have Israel. Like, for example, like Jewish people did not have the state until 1948. That's all that all comes from the hypocrisy, as you pointed out, really. And at the same time, in my opinion, looking back the history, including the Holocaust, but it's not just the Holocaust, all these persecutions that Jewish people went through, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion, if there is no Jewish state, Israel, there is going to be a very, very horrific event in history again.
You
Yeah.
know, Sam Harris, the philosopher, Sam Harris, several years ago,
Mhm.
he, guys, I just recently saw what he said a few weeks ago. He said, till a few years ago, he was anti-Zionist, was anti-Israel, and so forth. But he says now, after October 7th, because I've seen the incredible anti-Semitism
Mhm.
around the world, global anti-Semitism
Mhm.
that is not rational,
Yeah, this is
that
not
that
about
target,
anti-war. It's an
no,
anti-Semitism.
exactly.
It's not
He
a
says
privilege, but it's a
no,
right.
and he says the following. This he says until October 7th, and I'm a Jew. He says about himself, I'm Jewish. I wasn't pro-Zionist, but you know something? Now I understand why Zionism as a political movement was created. Because you know why? We have no one but ourselves to rely on because the world community is anti-Semitic. The world community does want us to be taken away from this world. The world community is hypocritical. The world community is full of hate.
Mm.
And because of that, you, the world community, has made me into a Zionist.
Yeah.
That's why. Because self-preservation. And you will not manipulate me and gaslight me, he says, to turn me into a self-hating person and saying Zionism is bad. It's not racism, it's self-survival. We don't hurt anybody, and you will not destroy our ability and our will and our right to live as human beings with our own identity as Jewish people. And this comes from Sam Harris.
I see. Well, I understand what he says, but I have adored Zionism for decades.
Mm-hmm.
I admired Israel for a very long time. So it's very sometimes very hard for me to understand some people who really do not understand Zionism, for example. But at the very core line, this is about the right of existence, really. And
Exactly.
and there is no such thing as, see, we from outside, we create problems, inside Israel.
Right.
We're what not I'm just trying not to do this, but what the media is doing is that, they are reporting something that don't exist. Like, for example, Jewish people are persecuting, the Muslims, all these
Yeah.
things, right?
Right. Exactly. Right.
Christians exist, and
Lies, 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 and lies, and lies, and lies, and
right?
lies, lies, and lies.
And at first I thought, it was a lie. And then, I started to wonder what that means. I mean, it's a
Hmm.
sin to do that.
Yeah, it has to say exactly.
And
It's exactly.
anti-Semitism is not a privilege, to
Yeah,
be Jewish. It's something like, as if, like Jewish people, have like privilege, and that's why, they discriminate people, those things. If
no.
people explain,
Let's
Jewish people don't. Mhm.
so let's analyze. I have to go another minute, but let's analyze this way. So there are 8 billion people.
Mhm.
8 billion people. Out of the 8 billion, there's only 15 million Jews,
Mhm.
and you're telling us that we have the privilege? Think about that. Think about the insanity. Think about the actual stupidity, the insanity, the hypocrisy, the insanity. 8 billion non-Jews,
Yeah.
8 billion non-Jews. We're 15 million Jews, and we have the privilege.
Mhm.
Wow, something is really upside down.
Right?
Something's really upside down. If
Yeah.
8 billion people who
Mhm.
control the world believe that 15 million
Mhm.
Jews have privilege, that's amazing.
So,
That's
I
amazing.
mean, you have to really go, and I have to let you go. And I really believe that, th there is a place, where Jewish people feel that, it's, like, probably custom, for example,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
have Shabbat.
Yes.
That's Israel to me.
Hmm.
So, so I hope that, you have, next Shabbat, like,
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, like, a peaceful Shabbat. And,
Thank you so much.
I pray that, it continues throughout the
Thank,
generation.
thank you very much. Thank you so much for your kindness. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
the
no,
podcast.
I don't take this for granted, and I really appreciate, you for, being very, like decent to me, very kind. And, I really appreciate that, came to my podcast today, and thank you so much.
I appreciate it, that you let me start a bit late because we had the sirens. We had an attack.
Okay,
So that
okay.
was great.
So
So
I hope
yes,
that you stay safe, and
thank you.
I pray that yeah, I just pray for you, and
Thank you so much. And I want to wish all to my non-Jewish brothers and sisters in the world, that you be blessed and keep the Shabbat, and enjoy Shabbat. It's your privilege, it's your inheritance, it's your tradition.
Mhm.
It's something that's been carrying us now for 3,000 years. And please learn about it, become part of it, and let
Mm.
us all together have one Shabbat from week to week. And I want to bless all our non-Jewish listeners who have an open mind, who care about the Jewish people, who care about the truth, and who are willing to become
Mhm.
moral fighters for justice and
Mhm.
so forth.
Yeah.
All the world we unite together on the God's umbrella of love and justice and forgiveness, and may all of us reach our highest potential. Very soon, God will send His Mashiach, the Messiah. We'll have messianic days of peace and love and goodness and kindness.
Okay. So thank you so much, and I just another again, you please stay safe, really, and
Thank you,
I
thank you.
believe that there will be justice, really.
Yes, we know you will. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye bye.
So
Bye bye.
have a yeah. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
I hope that people understand the nature of anti-Semitism, as I discussed with um, Rabbi Schwartz, because it is very serious. And as an individual, um, I thought that not talking about anti-Semitism is important. However, after October 7th, that was not enough. Obviously, um, Hamas is not just an anti Semitic organization, it wants to destroy the state of Israel, and it's a proxy of Iran. And I just don't understand the Japanese lawmakers' position of not supporting Israel, and I do not represent anything. So I will just clearly say that I support Israel, and may God bless the state of Israel. And lastly, I have to say thank you, President Trump, because it finally happened. Furlough is gone forever. Okay, so I hope you have a good night. Um, and I pray for Israel every day. Good night.